recording, but I don't mind. Okay, so again, thank you everyone for coming along to one of the later sessions in the day. I know it's been a very packed day with lots of information being thrown at you, and I appreciate your energy for coming along. As you can read, today's session is why rolling your own DevOps stack is a false economy, maybe, probably, possibly. And the reason I add those extra words is because it is a viewpoint, it is an opinion. There have been many opinions that suggest that building your own stack and scripts and tools and things is the way forward, which is a viewpoint. I don't necessarily disagree, despite the title of the talk, but what I'd like to do in today's session is to give you some additional context around that approach to help you make your own decisions. I love when people make their own decisions. So, who am I? Why do I get to give you my opinions? I am Rob Cowell. I am one of the DevOps advocates at GearSet, which is the only time I will mention that word. I'm not here to sell you anything, convince you to buy it, although Roman's talk a moment ago did a pretty good job of that. I am very neutral. I just want you to stop using change sets. Before that, I was a developer, architect, does everything, only person that's got access to the org since 2010. Before that, I was doing Java, .NET, PHP, and things since 96, and I've been poking code around since 1982. So yeah, I've seen a few things over the years. So that's me. So let's get into it. So the promise of DevOps: faster software delivery, more reliable releases, the ability to iterate quickly based on that user feedback. All these benefits have been talked to death. It's all very clear. You get that reduced time to market, improved quality, blah, blah, blah. But getting those benefits requires a significant investment of time or money, or both, depending on what you're doing, but also like skills and people's learning curve on investing in how to actually do a lot of this stuff. Now, open source tools have been discussed quite a lot today in these gentlemen's sessions and others. I'm not averse to open source. I use open source. I've historically contributed to open source. But open source and other free or low-cost options for DevOps are readily available, but integrating and maintaining them, not so much maintaining the tools themselves, but getting them all to talk to each other nicely can incur a little bit of overhead. And that's kind of the main area that I want to sort of talk about today. Now, many teams will start building their own custom DevOps pipelines with scripts and open source tools, and it is an appealing way to get started. But sometimes it can fail to deliver those benefits because it costs more than you expect in terms of both hard costs, so developers' time, and opportunity costs, which we'll dive into a little more. So when you start looking at the path of building your own DevOps platform, the immediate costs, they seem pretty minimal. Just a little bit of time to evaluate some tools, start experimenting, start having a bit of a play in a sandbox or a scratch org, everything sort of low risk. But those costs can ramp up pretty quickly. So selecting the right tools in the first place takes a bit of time and investment of effort to research and compare and make sure that it fits your process. And I am a big fan of making sure that you find tools that fit your process, not change your process to fit somebody's tools. Okay, that's an important thing. Don't change the way that you work unless it's terrible. Then there's the ongoing maintenance, upgrades, and troubleshooting that it takes. Now, when I talk about upgrades, you have great tools like Nicholas's famous SFDX hard disk, which Nicholas maintains. Thank you, sir. But if there's a new release, you've got to go and check that there's a new release. You've got to install it. You've got to make sure that there's no regressions. He's shaking his head. There's probably an auto-install, auto-update thing in VS Code, I suspect, but he can explain that. But I unfairly do pick on his tool, but the general approach with a lot of these tools is that you kind of have to have your eye on the ball a little bit to make sure that you're using the latest version and that it plays nicely. There's no things that have changed or are deprecated potentially. And it takes a little bit of time. And then you look at some of the bigger tools. I mean, we are in a very unique niche within a niche in Salesforce DevOps. But if you look at the wider market, things like Jenkins, Selenium, SonarQube, all of these things, they also have upgrades and new releases. And you've got to make sure that you can integrate those into your pipeline, which again, keeping everything running smoothly takes a little bit of effort. And potentially any custom scripts that you have to invoke these tools may or may not need updating. So don't underestimate the level of expertise that you're going to need to operate those tool chains. In fact, a lot of companies will actually hire a DevOps engineer just to keep the wheels turning. Okay, it's another headcount, it's more resource that could be better spent potentially working on actual Salesforce business and customer problems. Some companies like to run things on premise. There's no judgment here. We are cloud people, but sometimes in some industries such as banking, healthcare, insurance, etc., they're a little more risk averse. But then the facilities and the infrastructure costs to keep those going, build servers, test machines, data centers, etc., all that cost can build up. And again, sometimes in a lot of cases, you'll say, oh, this is a free tool that we can run, but the actual running cost, the overhead of that can be overlooked sometimes. So we talked a little bit about the complexity of integrating all of these things, especially when you've got multiple tools, multiple providers, be those commercial providers, be those open source providers, or even something that you've kind of scraped together yourself by getting the output of this and piping it into the input of that. The script that actually does that piping, it's another piece of software that you have to maintain. And each tool might use different technologies and interfaces. Hopefully, the majority of things are using things like JSON, worst case scenario XML. If anyone's using SOAP packets, please don't do that, please, no. But things like connecting your version control to your CI/CD tool, which then hooks into your test execution script, or your code quality analysis, things like PMD or the Salesforce code analyzer, thank you, Mike, or code scan by AutoRabbit, all of these things, you've got to plug them in somewhere. So you can imagine a scenario where you've got a sort of a master outer script that's coordinating and moving this traffic around. Okay, and that script needs writing. Somebody needs to develop that. But then also you have this challenge where if you have all of these disparate elements, tracing and visibility across what's happening where within that pipeline can become a little more difficult. Again, you can use things like Jenkins or GitHub Actions to pull these things together. But again, somebody's got to build them. And it takes a lot of planning as well. So you've got to think, okay, so I've got all these components, and there is a process going through my pipeline. Which things can run in parallel? Which things need to wait until it's finished? What do I do if one part of that entire pipeline fails? Do I have to think about a rollback? Can I continue and just ignore things? Do I need to notify somebody? So again, overhead all the time. What is the impact of that? Have I pressed the wrong button? No. There we go. Okay. So the opportunity cost we mentioned earlier, the opportunity to spend developer time working on real-world Salesforce problems, getting your day job done, versus the amount of developer time and resource that you're looking on maintaining or building those pipelines. So your engineers, they have this great deep knowledge of how to implement Salesforce, how to bend it to their will, to make it dance on the head of a pin if they need to. The community is full of great experts. But if you're pulling their time away to go and work on, okay, I've done this simple change, how do I get it from here to here? That's time that they could be better spent picking up the next amazing change. And you're diverting that technical talent in directions that it might not need to go. And it slows down the delivery of those features. It slows down your roadmap. You're not as agile, to use the big A word, that potentially your project managers wish you were. So it's another consideration. So this isn't the hard sell. This is the point for consideration. And you'll notice I don't name any specific platform, but leveraging an out-of-the-box integrated platform can accelerate realizing some of the benefits of DevOps, okay? So a lot of those best practices, those hard-won lessons, those challenges that we've fought, other people have worked on, okay? Not necessarily always solved, and I will concede that point, but a lot of thought has gone into, okay, what are the core things that we need to be able to achieve in some of these platforms? You know, yes, there's our platform, there's our friends out in the expo Capado, you know, please go and talk to them about their way of doing things. You know, there are dedicated out-of-the-box Salesforce platforms that take you from origination of a piece of work through testing, through migration between environments, and getting you out to production and getting the job done. And they're designed to work together seamlessly, okay? There are no little pieces of glue code that you need to worry about because they have written them for you, okay? And it's all presented within this front end, okay? So it avoids some of those complex integration challenges. Ongoing maintenance and upgrades and new features and stuff, that's handled by a vendor as well. So to give it a bit of a parallel, just to really kind of set it into your mind, think about the reasons that we use Salesforce itself, okay? Instead of using a bit of this system and a bit of this system and 20 Excel spreadsheets and CSV files, we don't want to deal with that kind of thing. So we get Salesforce, okay? It's the UI, it's the database, it's the business logic, it's the infrastructure, we don't need to worry about all of that stuff. So, you know, of course we configure, we develop, okay, but we're developing business solutions, we're not developing IT solutions, okay? So that mentality of why do I go and buy a vendor solution? You already have. You bought Salesforce, or at least somebody in your organization or your customers, or somebody has decided that Salesforce is the better way of doing this. Okay? We get 3 releases a year. You don't have to install patches, upgrade servers, deliver the network. I think you get the idea of kind of where I'm going with this one. But let's have a little bit more. Have I changed slides? Oh. Yes, it's caught up with me. So some of the other things, so in that self-developed stack, as some of those components are updated, we have to update and things suddenly stop working. Don't need to worry about that anymore. Somebody else's problem. There's nothing better than something being somebody else's problem so that you don't have to stay up till 2 o'clock at night trying to fix things. You can go to the nightclub if that's your thing, or you can go to bed if you're a little older like I am. With dedicated platforms, all that upgrade's handled. They monitor the new versions of all the integrated tools and bake them in. So for example, a certain tool that I promised I wouldn't mention again, we use PMD, which ironically is an open source tool, and we are allowed to use it because that's the terms of open source, and we do contribute back, I would add. But every time there's a new version of PMD Apex, which is the code scanning tool, it's our responsibility to look at that and integrate it into our platform so that when we run our code analyzer, it just works for you, the customer, okay? That's just an example of, a vendor, and admittedly the one I know the most, looking at the wider picture of, okay, we need to raise the bar here, but we don't expect you to have to go and install PMD and update things. So you're freed from that maintenance and infrastructure element. And again, it frees up your developers to do what you're nominally paying them for. And those developers, they are the conduit for delivering that value out to your users. Why is this so slow to catch up with me? I'm looking at a completely different slide. Okay, it's fine, it's fine. So, you can then actually highlight the, or focus on being able to actually get that value out to the users. So, in the end, it's really not...
Changing the title and the image, the paragraph has been the same for the last few slides.
That is very strange. Okay, just look at the beautiful AI-generated pictures for now. It's right, I'll keep talking. So in the end, the core goal of DevOps that we talked about, the promise of DevOps that we talked about at the beginning, is to maximize the speed and the quality of delivering those features. And the trouble can be sometimes that building your own DevOps stack means that it focuses less on dev and more on ops, which isn't really what we're aiming for. DevOps is an interesting title. I think it's not so much either of those two things. It's taking your dev and getting it into the hands of customers. Okay, so it's much more of a delivery thing, and you want to be focused on getting the features. Okay, not the delivery in itself. The end doesn't justify the means, as they say. Engineers love spending time on building things that matter. They don't want to spend their time working on the engine of how that happens. So by getting a purpose-built DevOps platform, you've kind of removed that tax that you're imposing on your engineering teams and allowing them to innovate and quickly address the problems and get that sense of satisfaction. There is this sense of satisfaction. Certainly when I was a developer and architect, it's like, yes, I've solved that problem for them. I am the greatest. I am the genius of this company. I have saved them so much money or earned them so much money. Not that I get to see any of that money. But the bottom line is, it's about getting the maximum output from your most important asset in your entire development pipeline, which is your developers, or admins, or architects, but the implementers, the deliverers. That's the most valuable part of any Salesforce DevOps pipeline. And with that, yay, a slide that actually changed the text. So that's all I had to say, really. I've deliberately baked in some time for some questions because I know that there are varying opinions on the value of this. The biggest objection I tend to see around, let's just go and get a vendor tool is, but it's so expensive. Yeah, so are developers' hours. Go and speak to your finance teams and just get a good comparison of numbers. I'm not saying there's a right way or a wrong way. What I'm saying is give it some more thought around actually what is the true cost of these types of things. So with that, any questions or counter opinions?
Not a counter opinion at all, because I totally agree on what you said, and specifically what you said about spending time on DevOps pipelines and building all this up, right? It's not just a matter of time and money, therefore it's also a matter of expertise and willing of people to invest their time in these things. And most clients I see, there's not even the will to do that, right? They just want to get it deployed, and they are insanely pissed of change sets, obviously, right? So they're looking for a solution. So that's why a platform whose name we don't mention here is very valid, right? And worth every cent. And what I wanted to add is what's also important, because in the world of open source, even if there are great people like Nicolas who work insanely well on their tools, you often need support. And you need support immediately. And I remember working with the platform, with whose name we don't mention here, that I get the support. And it doesn't matter if it is Friday in the middle of the night or something, there's a chat button, I can click on that and somebody will answer and we will fix my issue. Most of the time it was my own stupidity, but they help me, right? And this is also very important for lots of clients, that they have someone who is responsible by contract. And this is also very important. I just wanted to add that.
No, but it is important to realize that, yes, the tools are expensive, and part of that cost is the cost of operating the support thing. It's free to you, the customer, in so much as there are no support contracts, there are no additional payments, but it is kind of baked into the price in certain platforms. Okay, there is always an ultimate cost somewhere, and it's just getting that quality of life balance between do we want to fix it ourselves, or do we just need to solve the problem so everyone can go home tonight? So yeah, and again, we have joked about not naming the company I work for, because I'm certainly not in sales. I'm an advocate, which is a bit like Salesforce's developer evangelists, if you're aware of them. I just go and spread the good word of not using change sets. But I would like to call out that there are other big Salesforce DevOps vendors that will solve exactly these same problems for you. Not always necessarily in the same way, and they everyone has their unique spin on it, but the core problem of getting your changes from here to here to here, tested, validated, through source control ideally, and into production, and knowing that process is nice and smooth, and you don't have to worry about, okay, who's going to build the tool that delivers our tools? Okay, so we're not the only player in the game, and big respect to the others as well. Even that DevOps center thing, they're heading in the right direction. They just haven't arrived at their destination yet. But look at their roadmap. They're definitely making the right decisions. We're just waiting for them to implement them. Okay, I have no downer on them. I think they were just a little later to that party. Anybody else? Nicholas, of course.
And not a counter opinion too. I fully agree with everything you said. Building a pipeline from scratch, it's a useless idea because you will build something that is already existing everywhere, and you will have to maintaining on each project. I agree about all the versioning issues, etc. But maybe I think it really depends of the resources, of the people that you have working on the project. Because if you have a DevOps expert or several DevOps experts, and you have a ready-to-use GitLab with pipelines, etc., you already have all the tooling. So it doesn't mean it means you don't care about infrastructure. Basically, if you don't start from scratch, and if you use, I think I can speak for Aslam for DX at Scale, or Jason for Cumulus CI. We handle the versioning and the ascending compatibility. So basically, the idea is to have tools out of the box, and you just have to manage the configuration. And indeed, there is no UIs. It's not admin friendly for the release manager, etc. So I will be a little bit more contrasted and say that at the end, it is really important before choosing a DevOps solution, and depending it is one of the companies that we won't name, or SFDX Ardis, Cumulus CI, or DX Scale. We are not companies, so we can be named. Yeah. I think what is really important is to evaluate the pros and the cons of each solution, and not say this one is not a good idea or this one is too expensive, but really see what you need in the context you have. And I will conclude by saying that all open source people are honored to see a session about why people should not use us.
Yes, with much power comes much responsibility. So picking up on something that Nicholas said there is well, a couple of things he said there. So the first thing is that, if you're not comfortable with DevOps, if you don't have that level of experience, or if you have a team that is perhaps more admin heavy, the open source and build your own scripts might not be the path for them. They need ease of use. I'm not disparaging admins by any stretch of the imagination. The things that they can build without code. How did you build that and still not use code? They continue to amaze me. But sometimes, if they have to jump into a JSON file or even worse, a YAML file, if anyone's familiar with those, and just basically build scripts, it's not for them. Okay. Now, equally, if you do have that expertise, if you have some strong developers potentially that have worked on other platforms and done DevOps a lot before, there's still that cost. How many years did it take them to learn that experience? That was an investment in their knowledge, in their technical career. Okay, it may not have been spent at the company they're at now, but somewhere in their development trajectory, they've invested significant amounts of time to figure out how to do this. So, more factors to consider. Do you want your engineers learning DevOps on the job, or do you want your engineers engineering on the job? And I think that brings us around to time. Thank you very much, everybody. Oh. My introduction slide, yes. See, the text changes sometimes. This one? Oh, yes. Yes, me. If you want to ask me questions or anything, my real name is up there. My Threads, Twitter, X, whatever it is on my T-shirt. I make it nice and easy for everybody. Feel free to reach out to me and ask me questions at any time. I do webinars and things, and I still don't mention the company name on those either. But yeah, I'm always open to talk DevOps. Thank you.